Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for our live stream today. If you're joining us via LinkedIn or YouTube, thank you. We appreciate it. My name is Anthony. I'm the Senior Education Manager here at TIA. I'm joined by two wonderful panelists, Michael Caney, the CCO of Highway, and Scott Cornell of Travelers Inland Marine. They will be introducing themselves further shortly, but we just have a few housekeeping items to go through first. And we're going to start with the TIA antitrust statement. Discussion, comments, and presentations during TIA functions must not refer to any past, present, or future rates, prices, or anything related thereto, include any reference to marketing strategies, include any discussion of boycotts of any person, product, or firm, or inhibit any members' employees from discussing employment with other member companies. Things you hear during the meeting that are confidential and private to TIA should not be shared publicly without its prior consent or used against or in competition with TIA. Next up for questions during the webinar, if you have any comments or questions, please enter them where you can on the LinkedIn Live event or in the YouTube comment section. If you would rather send your question via email, if you could please add in the subject line live stream question and send your email to education@tianet.org, and we will try to answer your questions later on after our panelists get through most of their discussion. Additionally, when you want to come back and review this recording, you can come back to the LinkedIn live stream event where you are currently watching this or the YouTube event, and you should be able to rewatch this recording. And if you have any questions or issues with that, please reach out to us at education@tianet. With that, Michael and Scott, I will turn it over to you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Scott, if anybody is tuning into a cargo theft webinar and doesn't know you, I don't know where they've been. But for the benefit of the audience, go ahead and tell everybody you are the OG cargo theft investigator.
I've been doing it for a while, right? So 30 plus years doing cargo theft investigations and supply chain security. I currently lead transportation for Travelers Insurance. I helped start a cargo theft investigation team here at Travelers in 2005. And then took over transportation in 2015 in general. And I'm also currently serving as the chairman for TAPA, which is the Transported Asset Protection Association, which is a nonprofit organization that establishes supply chain security standards for the industry.
Yeah, man, I'll never forget the first TAPA event I went to. I didn't know you existed until I think I got a random invite from you or somebody. I went to that one in Dallas, and I think it's probably one of the more underrated organizations that the industry doesn't know about. If you are a compliance person on this call and you're not a TAPA member, you're not going to the conferences, I recommend you go. You prioritize that in your annual budgeting. One of the things that I've been talking about lately as I've been doing appearances is that, and we'll get into this more, Scott, but this needs to be someone's full-time role if you're a freight broker. This doesn't need to be the extra thing that someone on your staff does. And kind of the best way to learn about that really from seasoned compliance and risk leaders is probably at TAPA. It's probably the most concentrated veteran group of mix of law enforcement and practitioners that I've come across. So there's your plug, Scott. For those of you that don't know me, I'm just an old freight broker. I've been doing this about 20 years, but I love freight brokers and I hate bad guys. And so I get to help freight brokers have safer businesses and eliminate fraud. And I do that in the context of Highway. And I love what I do. And Scott and I become good friends because we share a common mission and a common bond. And hopefully we'll get to talk about all that stuff today. So
I warned you that you'd become really passionate about this if you got involved in it, and you have. So.
Well, and I think the thing is to frame the conversation, Scott, is the thing that kind of keep you passionate about is that it's constantly changing. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today is you're not done. Right. And I think that's one of the things you love to talk about is you can't be okay, well, it's fixed now. It's not, so maybe talk about that a little bit. So there's really two context things that I would just love for you to lean into. One is this line in our show run that's like, hey, cargo theft isn't new, but it's getting smarter. And then the second thing is the context of like the Guy Fieri thing. Like, I keep getting asked about this. I'm like, this is only new to you, person asking me. Like, I've got hundreds of like liquor facilities geocoded in our data layer so that we get automatic warnings anytime we see that pop up because it's so high theft. Like, just because 60 Minutes decided to finally put our buddy Keith Lewis on TV to talk about this doesn't mean it's new. So elaborate on that a little bit, Scott.
Yeah, so we'll talk first about, I think the conversation you just expressed that you're having with people is the same conversation you and I had when we first met, right? I said, hey, get ready because it'll shock you, that it's out there, but it's been there for a long time, and a lot of people just don't know about it. I used to tell people that a lot of times when they would ask what I do and I'd tell them, they'd look at me like I had three heads, right? Because they hadn't heard about it. So when we talk about the changes in cargo theft, I always say cargo theft is like a big river, and it has those two different currents. It has that undercurrent, which is pretty much consistent and steady, but then it has those top currents that change and shift all the time, right? And that's really what cargo theft is like. The base cargo theft, which, for the majority of my career has been straight theft, really it changes, but it's been pretty consistent. The bottom line with straight theft is you have to physically be there. You're going out, you're stealing the freight, whether it's a full truckload or a partial truckload of pilferage or whatever. Straight theft hasn't changed all that much. The tools that they can use, some of the techniques and everything like that, straight theft has pretty much been consistent. Strategic theft, which is where you've really had to dive into, Michael, is where we've seen the biggest changes. But cargo theft as a whole changed drastically between 2020 and 2022. And we talk about this very frequently. Prior to 2020, most cargo theft was straight theft, and the majority of it was conducted by these very small, unsophisticated regional crews that, were 8 to 15 in size. Their methods were very basic. They weren't very sophisticated. Anybody who was investigating cargo theft, whether it was law enforcement, private sector, whatever, we knew all the crews. We knew the leaders of the crews.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It was kind of known. Like, you kind of knew who to watch for, whether it was Kentucky or California. You kind of knew, right?
You knew what crews operated in what areas, what they targeted, how they moved the freight once they stole it. It was, it was pretty, it was pretty consistent. Between 2020 and 2022, cargo theft in the United States went international. And in order for international rings to conduct cargo theft from dozens of other countries, which I hope you're going to talk about this, Michael, or these dozens of different countries that we're seeing cargo theft conducted from now, it really moved the strategic theft needle, right? So strategic theft went from 4 to 5% of all cargo theft in the United States to very quickly now 40% of all cargo theft in the United States. So CargoNet reported between 2021 and 2024 a 1,475% increase in strategic cargo theft. And that is large, sophisticated international rings that are able to be anywhere and steal freight anywhere through methods like double brokering scams, identity thefts, fictitious pickups, MC number procurement, to fraudulently represent themselves as legitimate trucking companies on paper, things like that. So those strategic theft methods, 2012, 2013 is when we really started to see strategic theft peak up, and it was very basic. It was identity theft and fictitious pickups. That was it. Those were the two methods. And again, it was 4% of everything. Now
was the commodity list narrow back then, Scott, or was it as broad as it is now?
Yeah, the commodity list changed around 2008 to 2010 when we had that big recession, right?
Okay.
That was during that recession. Prior to that recession, electronics were primarily targeted, and then it was pharmaceuticals, and tobacco was largely targeted, and things like that. When we came through that recession, we saw the cargo thieves shift. So again, this speaks to what you're talking about, these changes, these shifts, right? So that was the big shift back then. The big shift back then was they moved to food and beverage, right? They moved to hey, people don't have the money for luxury items right now because we're in a recession, so we'll go to food and beverage. Well, they
Yeah.
realized right then, hey, this is a great category for us because it's largely untraceable. The evidence is consumed, it disappears in a few days. People don't
Easy.
chase it as long. And so they stuck with that. And then from 2010 on, we saw food and beverage remain consistently in that number one spot. So that was a big shift back then. And then now 2020 to 2022, the big shift is we've gone to these big international rings that are leading cargo theft, and they're doing it through primarily strategic theft. So while it's ticked up to 40%, I anticipate it's going to continue to tick up.
Yeah, and I think the general hypothesis or thesis that we've gotten is that when we watch the commodity, like the targeted commodities change, is that gets driven by like these black market buy orders that are like out there in the international world of, okay, we need a couple hundred loads of tires, or we need a couple hundred loads of because that's what we're seeing, Scott, right? Like, I think the marked difference is the sudden high volume of theft, where you would see like, okay, steal 2 loads, 5 loads, 10 loads. And now it's like, I think because of things like what Travelers and Tappa have done with your teams, like boots on the ground, what guys like Keith have done, technology partners like us, we've made it harder. So they have to strike big. Like they have to be more coordinated, and it has to be big and at once.
Well, I think the size part of it comes in large part from that international shift, right? And
Yeah.
what do I mean by that? Well, those small crews, they had very limited ways to move stolen freight. We would find it at flea markets. We would find it at little mom and pop stores that didn't know that they had bought stolen goods. We would find it, they would have a fence that could maybe take a load or two. Well, now you have these international rings, and two things. One, yes, they have customers on the black market that, like you mentioned, Michael, that are saying, hey, I need a load of tires. I need a load of energy drinks. I need a load of this. I need a load of that. But at the same time, they are very good at laundering the freight. So,
talk about that.
so they're able to clean up the freight, remove labels, relabel things. Listen, you've heard me say this a number of times. Cargo thieves are really good at two things in particular. One is knowing what to steal and when, right? What's popular right now that we should target because we'll be able to sell it quickly. But the number two thing is return on investment. They don't have a problem spending a little bit of money to clean the freight, relabel the freight, rebox the freight, unbox the freight, move it in different ways so that they can actually move it into a legitimate supply chain. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is, keeping in mind that these are international rings, when we saw that shift to these international rings, we also saw a shift of where the freight moves. Prior to those international rings, 6 or 7 out of every 10 loads stolen would stay here in the United States, and you would find it all different places. When we shifted to these international rings, 6 or 7 out of every 10 loads stolen is moved out of the country. So now if they relabel it, if they clean it up, if they take ownership away from it, if they move it through 3 or 4 different segments of the supply chain, it becomes legitimate on paper. So now they don't necessarily always have to move this freight in the black market. They can sell it to people in other countries who don't have any knowledge of the fact that it was stolen in the US or that it may have been stolen goods, and they can enter it into legitimate supply chains. So you don't necessarily always have to see those orders coming from those black market channels they want to move it through, because they can sell it openly as clean goods without people knowing that they're not.
Yeah. Okay. So I think maybe a good transition is, so these are trends. Like, can we get into a little bit about, I think I did this, I talked to Acrisure about this yesterday. They were kind of like, hey, when does it get better? And you've talked to Jordan a lot. We take the same approach that like banking and finance takes. And so, finance and banking have a lot of controls in place, Scott, but there's still financial fraud. There's still financial crimes. And so I think what I want everyone to understand is like, this doesn't stop. Like, it's not going away. Like, it's here now. They found a honey hole. They've made millions of dollars, and it doesn't, like, our job all day long is to play war games internally and figure out where the next vector is coming from. So I think there's a couple things. One, Scott, I think I want to try to comment on the two vectors we're seeing the most of and get your feedback. And then if you could just elaborate on like the mindset, like this isn't a freight broker doesn't need to be like, okay, we're good now. Like it just, that's why this needs to be a full-time job. So Scott, the vectors that we're seeing where it takes a lot of pattern matching and a lot of work is the compromised inbox of the motor carrier. The digital hygiene of a motor carrier is very difficult to manage because they're not our customers. So we've moved to a solution of just secure document delivery, so that like the statement we've made, Scott, is like in the same way that your bank doesn't send you documents if you go buy a home, right? That's all done through Qualia. Like I bought a home, right? Qualia manages all of that document gating, right? That's a third party. They do this for title companies. It's the same thing. Like, do not send rate confirmations attached to an email. Do not. If you send rate confirmations attached to an email, even if you are my customer and use a part of my product, your freight will get stolen, full stop. Because you cannot control the digital hygiene of the carrier's inbox. And the cybercrime targeting the small motor carrier is rampant. Okay. The second thing is and I use air quotes, sold MC, because I ain't really selling it, Scott, right? Like, I'll give you $10,000 cash in a Cracker Barrel parking lot is not a legitimate sale. But it's when you and I first started talking about this, it was fairly easy for a criminal to hold a lot of MCs and clean those MCs and do bad things with them. We've made that exponentially harder. Guys like Dale Prax, who have turned the light on from just a regulatory standpoint, have made the holding and laundering of MCs harder. So now you have to get a hold of one. You have to get a hold of one that's been operating. And so what we see is the pattern of the bought and sold MC and the fact that they are operating for long amounts of time legitimately. We have to watch for them to break bad. So they're casing the neighborhood very strategically. Like there's a combination of like they're watching for who has the freight on the load board. They're operating in networks and they're waiting. And so those are the two most prevalent vectors we see in our data. How does that match up with what you're seeing, and how are you advising, clients and CAPA members to fight against that?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is that the most common method still in the industry is the double brokering scam. Now, part of what you're talking about, the compromised inboxes and things like that, is how they get to that double brokering scam, right? They use that to gain access to the freight and then rebroker it and pose as a legitimate broker after they've scammed the original broker, things like that. So, and then that MC number thing, I do think as a whole, the industry, whether it's companies like yourself and similar companies, people like Dale Prax that you mentioned who brought it to light, even we've seen the DOT and the FMCSA start to make it more difficult for that to happen. I do think that's becoming more difficult. I do think it's still happening. I would also say that when you talk about the purchase of the MC numbers, one of the cargo thieves, these organized rings, they're slick, right? So when they first went out to the industry and they were like, hey, we want to buy MC numbers, people push back like, why do you want to buy MC numbers? Then they changed their language. And I think language is very important, right? You and I talk about this all the time. They started going out and saying, hey, we want to buy your business. We're investors. We want to buy your business. We're supply chain investors. You've done a really good job, Michael, of building your company. And, we want to buy that company. Well, the average person, whether you're a truck driver or me or other people, they don't buy and sell businesses every day, right? So when you use that language, people go, oh, somebody's interested in buying my business. And they say, well, we want to buy your MC number. We want to buy the logins. We want to buy the cell phone number. We want to buy the email address. So to your point, once the industry started making it more difficult to do that, they had to take that next step of, hey, we're going to buy your business. We're going to buy the logins. We're going to buy the email. We're going to buy the cell phone. And they continue to progress that to try and get around all the defenses that the industry and companies like yourself put up. What do we tell our clients? We tell our clients everything you do has to start with process and procedure, right? And this is, you and I were talking about this, right? You can't just go out, whether it's a company that vets carriers, whether it's covert tracking, whether it's you name the technology, you can't jump to what we consider the third step. The third level of protection is the technology.
Yep.
The first level is process and procedures. You have to put good process and procedures in place at your company, right? And then insert the technology into that process so that the technology does what it's been acquired to do, right? You can't, it's like buying a hammer and trying to use it as a screwdriver because you don't know how to use a hammer, you don't know what the hammer is for. You
Yeah.
have to have that process in place, insert the technology or the platform or
Yeah.
whatever terminology you want to use into that so that you're enabling that technology to be successful and not to fail. Because if you
Yeah.
use it wrong, it won't function the way you think it should function, and it won't be your fix. There is no silver bullet. We've had this conversation. There's
Never
no
will be.
one thing you can go out there and buy that will prevent you 100% from having a theft. So when you talk about procedures, TAPA developed the freight broker security requirements. We released them on July 15th. Part of those requirements is that you go out for the first two levels of certifications, that you go out and you get a platform that you insert into that process
Yep.
to be part of that process, to be a tool
Yep.
in that process.
One of the things that I've noticed, Scott. So like, look, I mean, I wrote about this the other day that like even sometimes our customers have a theft, right? Because in the same way that in financial crimes and other things, the vectors change. It's a game. Like, how quick can you stay on top of the vector? How quick can you detect the pattern for where it's going next? We had a couple of instances last week or 2 or 3 weeks ago with a large customer. The good news is we were able to help recover the cargo, right? We spotted a new pattern. We figured out what they did. We were able to do like a development release that night and now account for it. But we also had to train that customer on like, now this is what you watch for. This is what the alert means. We have to go get the TMS to integrate and adopt that. Like there's a lot that has to happen. It's not just magic. And like sometimes a truck can show up and you can see that truck, but if you don't know the digital pattern behind who's operating that, like it's both and. Like, you know what I'm saying, Scott? Like everybody's like, it's a tracking, it's both and. Because sometimes the truck showing up can be a legitimate carrier that is unknowingly being controlled by someone else.
Well, that's the double brokering scam we talked about,
Yep.
right? And like you said, there are different paths to get to that position where you can commit the double brokering scam as a thief. But yeah, they are sending out legitimate trucking companies who have no idea that they're being involved in a cargo theft.
One of the things that we see often is, we'll see somebody will report a theft to sometimes even not our own customer. And because they know guys like Michael Grace that work with us and they want our help. And what we typically see is unnecessary risk taken. Like the carrier just chose to obfuscate data and talk you into why it was okay, and you bought it. And so you have said this from a stage as much as you've said anything, as much as you've griped about like definitions and like, let's make sure we say the right thing. I think your equally loud argument is typically when we go in talking about your team, we find that a person made a decision that was outside of what was already documented.
Yeah,
And so
it's
the thing
quite
is, we see
common.
the same thing with technology.
Yeah, it's quite common, right? So it's usually not hard to find where the gap was. It's not usually hard to find. A lot of times, even when they have a process in place, you'll find that it's a break of process, right? Even when you go out and you get a tool, uh, a platform, or a vetting platform, and you insert it into your process. Did somebody in that process use the tool correctly? Did they use it to the full extent that it could be used? Michael Grace from your team has done postmortems. There's been times when I reach out to him and say, hey, let's take a look at this theft, and he's able to walk through and say, here's where the issue came in. So it's not hard to spot that, and I do think that goes to that process and procedure part of it, right? You can listen. If I use a comparative example, in the past, I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, we have a theft. Okay, well, do you have covert tracking? Yes, I have covert tracking. Okay, let's log into that tracking platform and get a location. Well, I'm the dispatcher, I don't have the password, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, okay, who has the password? Michael has the password. Okay, well,
Yeah.
let's call Michael. I've tried to call Michael 3 times. He's not picking up his phone because it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay, well, in essence, we have a $200 paperweight in the trailer right now,
That's correct.
right?
That's
And it's
correct.
the
Yeah.
same thing. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah, like you spent all this money to check a box, right? Like we talked about this, like how brokers would represent things at renewal time, right? So put your insurance hat on for a second. Like, yeah, they represent that they do all these things, but what's the follow through? Scott, how have you seen one of the things we wrestle with when we're trying to help a broker is like, hey, who owns this in your company? Who's the product owner of the tool? Who has authority and accountability around this? Some of our customers do it really well. And what I'd like you to talk about is the importance of like the culture of this being adopted in a freight broker. So my friend Andy Smith posted something on LinkedIn the other day that got me a lot of questions like, hey, we're a customer too. How do we do what Andy's doing? And what I've said to everyone is for Andy, this is a cultural thing. Like
Yes.
there's just no question inside of his company how this works. He will get me on the phone and wear me out.
Yeah, I've watched that
okay.
culture develop, and I think this is one of the top 3 things that I talk about. I talk about that the supply chain in general needs to develop a culture around cargo theft prevention, because to your point earlier, the most common question I get is, hey, when is this going to go back to normal? When is this going to settle down? And to your comment earlier, it's not. Even if the federal government develops a federal task force, which I think we're all hoping for and pushing for,
Yep.
it will be to combat what we're dealing with today. What we're dealing with today is not going to go away, right? So if you go back to the whole culture thing, I think your point is one that I love to make on a regular basis. Certainly, if you get a tool that's going to help you vet carriers, if you go out and you purchase a tool and you make an investment in that, there needs to be somebody at the company that owns that. But you cannot centralize all of it into that one person or 2 people or 3 people. You have to develop a culture of supply chain security across your company. When we go out and we work with our clients, which we do, we go out and we'll evaluate their process and procedures and everything like that. We spend days sometimes on site with our clients, rotating their entire staff through training modules
Yeah.
on red flags on cargo theft. We're not trying to make, let's say they have 100 employees. We're not trying to develop 100 experts. We're trying to develop a spider sense in 100 people.
Yeah.
That creates a culture so that anybody in that 100-person group can say, hey, this sounds like what I heard in that training a couple of weeks ago. Let me elevate this to my manager who owns this. And then now we have everybody working on that process.
Yeah.
And instead of just 2 or 3 people that brought in the platform or brought in the resource, and now they're trying to handle every single thing. No, everybody in your company has to play a role in it. No different than everybody plays a role in safety if you're a trucking company, right? In a trucking company, everybody preaches safety. This has to be preached as everybody at the company owns this. We all have to
100%.
work together on it.
Yeah, and I think the shift is like when we used to say everybody owns it, we literally meant like every single person owns it, and every single person has to log in and make a decision. Like, whoa, actually take the decision away from the floor. Teach the floor how to respect the process and know when to raise their hand.
That's
right?
that's exactly what I'm saying. No one, just have enough knowledge, just have enough, be part of the culture enough that you know when to raise your hand.
And I think the last thing I will say, I think Anthony, we've got to wrap up here pretty quick, is, when you think about a culture, is if you send somebody to one of our user conferences, or you send them to TAPA, or you send them to any kind of a risk thing, empower that leader when they get back, like give them executive audience. Like, one of the things I love about our friends, David and Zach Scott, that I think they do really well from a language perspective, is like this component lives in the sales operations function of their company.
Yes.
And so at their company, it's not seen as the boogeyman that wants to piss everybody off and slow them down. It is seen as a revenue enablement. And I have a mentor that worked in public banking for years. He told me, he said, it's like being a chief credit officer. And he said, the role of a chief credit officer in a bank is actually to help the organization go faster, not to be the fund ruiner. And so I think if you adopt this as a culture, and Scott and I will talk, even if you're not my customer, we will talk you through this. Like, this will become a revenue enabler for you.
Yeah.
If you do it right and it becomes a cultural thing. my job is to take everything I learned from Scott and see if I can program it, see if I can help automate those processes. But like, if it's not a cultural thing for you, you're still going to have more theft than you should have.
Right.
And I think that's what I would leave everybody with. Scott, anything you want to say, kind of closing up, that you think is like heavy on your mind today?
No, I think, you've done a great job getting us to all those points, but that cultural part, I think if you don't develop that culture, yeah, I think empowering that leadership group, like you said, right? So when we talk about Zach and David, right, they're just seen as part of every unit in the company, right?
Yep.
Even though they have key responsibilities in this area, every unit in that company sees them as part of what they do every day. And so I think this just goes as, this is the number one message you should take away from this. It can't just sit at your company with one or two people. It has to be owned by everybody. Everybody plays a role. The roles may be different,
Yep.
but enabling everybody to have enough part in that role to raise their hand, like you said, and say, hey, something isn't right here. Let's slow the process down for a minute and take a look at what we're doing. Because listen, everybody always wants to move freight fast, right? And that's the transportation industry. We're trying to do everything fast. What slows things down more than a theft? Nothing.
Like I was like, no trade, like it's the worst. Yeah.
Nothing slows anything down more than a theft, right? So
Yeah.
if you have to slow down in the process of moving the freight just a few seconds to spare yourself 2 weeks of trying to fix the theft,
Yeah,
that's a good return on investment.
Yeah. Scott, how do people get in touch with you? How do they find you?
You can reach out to me through Travelers. I'm easy to find through Travelers, through TAPA. And like you, I'm always willing to help anybody who reaches out. You don't have to be a customer, just like you. I don't like the bad guys. So if I can help impact cargo theft as a whole, you can find me both through Travelers and through TAPA.
Yeah, same thing. And if you are a freight broker and you are not a TAPA member, please go be a TAPA member. Right, there is just so much knowledge in that room, but there needs to be more people. And if you are in a freight broker, like, you need to send an executive level presence to TAPA. You need to go learn about like what's being done, and we're always there. There's always great vendors there.
I think it's important to point out too, Michael, that our host here, TIA, right? So I also serve on the TIA Cargo Theft Task Force, right? I think TIA has really stepped up over the last few years, recognizing this as a key issue for their clients, forming a task force, forming a vendor advisory force. We're coming out, the TIA, I'm helping do the new TIA survey for the clients so that we can pinpoint the problems for TIA members. So if you're a member of TIA, get involved in that part of the TIA, right? Not just the
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think the point thank you, Scott, for saying that. I think the point I want to make is like, this is a community thing, right? So almost all TAPA members are TIA members. And so a lot of what we learn at TIA comes out of TAPA, comes out of what happens from the strike teams, or whatever you call them, with Travelers. And so, this is a community thing, and it takes a lot of knowledge share, right? Because the other thing is what's going to happen is like some bad actor is going to listen to this and see if Scott and I divulge something that's going to help them be better. Like this is literally how this goes, right?
We know that, right?
Our events, we know
talk
this.
about it, right? We know it. Yeah.
Every time Scott and I remember, like, who's here?
Yeah.
So you can reach me, michael@highway.com. But if you want to talk about building a culture of security, like I think that's kind of Scott and I's thing right now, is like, how do we create a culture? And so please reach out to the TIA. There's a ton of resources. Anthony, thanks for having us. Is there anything else you wanted us to cover today?
That was a great session. Michael and Scott covered a lot. And I'd just like to leave everyone with a few reminders. If you are coming to Technovations, make sure to check out the Highway team. If you're not coming to Technovations and you're interested in what Michael and Scott were saying today, you can learn more and talk with Michael and the Highway team at Technovations in Phoenix in a few weeks. Right. As Scott and Michael just mentioned too, there are a ton of TIA resources we have for you in the member resource library, events, you name it, member resources, including complimentary courses. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Also, please be sure to check back for the LinkedIn posts with upcoming live streams such as this one. And if there are any questions, please feel free to reach out. The recording, Alejandro, will be available in this same event after it is concluded. And we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Scott, for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. Good to see you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.